may I share my thoughts with you regarding the recent Mission Impossible movie that was released a couple of weeks ago? Mission Impossible 7, or Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, as it's called, is the latest installment in the long-running Mission Impossible franchise that started back in 1986. Wow, it's been going on for the better part of 30 years, and almost all of the films have been commercially successful, except for this most recent one that's still showing in theaters. I don't know for how much longer it's likely to get taken off of screens due to its lackluster performance. But it really was a much hyped movie. It's been critically acclaimed by both fans and movie critics. But the film did not perform to expectations. Now, this film had a few things working against it. The first thing was that there were delays that were experienced during the production process, which ended up inflating its costs significantly. The film was being shot at around the time that the COVID pandemic blew up. And so many countries started to impose restrictions. There were lockdowns in some places, social distancing, all these types of things. Businesses were shut down. And at the time, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 was being filmed. And so they too were subjected to some of these restrictions, which now forced them to spend more and more money in order to be able to accommodate certain restrictive measures and some social, I guess some, what are these measures called? They're called standard SOPs, standard operating procedures. How in shops they will say social distance for however many feet, or that you have to wear masks and all this kind of stuff. And then he had to find accommodation for some of the crew who otherwise would have had to travel back to their home countries because the production was taking longer than necessary. So all of this just added to the costs, ballooning the budget for Mission Impossible 7 to $290 million. And this budget was just for the production. Typically, if a film is costing $290 million, you think, okay, that's probably production plus marketing, right? In this case, no, just the production. And then if you add marketing on top of that, which for a blockbuster of this caliber easily goes beyond $100 million. So you're looking at a production budget of something like production and marketing budget nearing $400 million or even slightly exceeding that. Meaning that for the production studio, for the film studio producing this film, Paramount Pictures, for them to consider this film a hit, the film would have to generate somewhere in the range of $800 million in the box office, both domestic US or North America plus internationally combined would have to total to about 800 or 900 million shillings for a film costing 400 million dollars to break even. So the first thing was the budget, it being too high, approximately $100 million higher than the last Mission Impossible film, which is considered to be a hit. So there was the inflated budget due to COVID restrictions and possibly other reasons. And then secondly, the film, the release window was also very competitive. It premiered in theaters a week before this juggernaut known as Barbenheimer was to be released in theaters. Barbenheimer meaning this double bill movie package, which included the film Oppenheimer and Barbie, which these are very highly anticipated films. The buzz behind these films was quite huge, possibly because it's a bit of a novelty. Everyone loves Christopher Nolan, and when it's announced that he's coming up with a film, usually people are excited to see it. And then in the case of Barbie, well, it's a very famous brand. Every little girl around the world knows of a Barbie. And even if you're not a little girl or you're a little boy, if you have a sister, you've probably grown up with Barbies all over the house, your sister's toys, right? Or perhaps your own if you're that kind of a boy. But also our mothers, our aunties, everyone we know has played with the Barbie doll. It's almost as ubiquitous and universal as, say, something like a Super Mario Brothers in terms of brand power. Meaning, with that much brand power, it would be easy to leverage that into like a huge box office draw, which ended up being the case for Barbie. So there was high anticipation for Barbie, which also was very creatively marketed. They were rather obscure when it came to discussing what the film was about. A lot of people say they were treated to a bait and switch. The studio insisted that the film wasn't a feminist movie, except it turned out to be a feminist movie. So people went with families expecting it to be just a cheerful, goofy, film, a slapstick film with a campy film with just everyone dressed in hot pink or neon pink and just being funny and singing musical numbers and all that kind of, easygoing fun stuff, right? Only to get there and I understand, I haven't seen the film, but like the dialogue is like super sexual, and then the themes being discussed were also very political. It was very pro-feminism. Although I've heard some people say that the film is unintentionally pro-men. I'll have to check it out and see exactly. But nonetheless, with Oppenheimer and Barbie being released in theaters just a week after Mission Impossible was released in theaters, it just immediately knocked Mission Impossible off of the top spot. And because the films were such cultural juggernauts, word of mouth regarding the Mission Impossible film just sort of fizzled out. No one was really talking about it anymore. All the talk was about, wow, Barbie this, wow, Oppenheimer this. And then there was an issue with IMAX and how I think Paramount Pictures or Tom Cruise was unable to secure screenings of Mission Impossible films in IMAX theaters, or it was limited to a very high degree, which I have heard some people argue that also may have limited its appeal. Tom Cruise insists that his films are made for the big screen immersive experience, and it could be true that because people weren't able to enjoy Mission Impossible on IMAX screens, that maybe that dulled its impact. I'm not very partial to that argument. I think it's one of the more weaker reasons as to why the film performed poorly. But between the enormous budget that it took to make the film and to market it, and then the film being released shortly before the juggernaut that is Barbie and Oppenheimer combined, and there's also another independent film called Sound of Freedom that apparently has really taken the winds out of the sails of the Mission Impossible film. I've heard people say that the audience that traditionally would have been supportive of Tom Cruise and his type of action movie stuff were instead drawn away to go see this film called Sound of Freedom, which is about child trafficking. Sound of Freedom, I think, has grossed over $150 million, and who knows, maybe that is money that would have gone to Mission Impossible. So there was a lot of competition among many movies in the box office or in the theaters, and Mission Impossible just got caught up in the fray, and there really wasn't much good buzz going for it after its initial screening. Following the release of Barbie and Oppenheimer, it just kind of fizzled out into the background, and I don't know. I guess the appeal wasn't strong enough to, sustain a good theatrical run. It just seems that it's a genuine flop, this movie, unfortunately, and the first ever for Mission Impossible. Even Mission Impossible 3, that a lot of people didn't like, certainly wasn't a loss. Didn't make a loss; it made a profit. Now, so those reasons aside, I'd like to give you my own thoughts as to why I think the film really hasn't resonated as powerfully as a lot of people expected. I actually don't think it's a good film. I was, for the first time in my life, bored while watching a Mission Impossible film. I sat there in the theater at some point. The film hadn't even reached halfway through, and I started glancing at my watch like, okay, how long has this been going on? It was really that boring. And I thought maybe I might get into the reasons as to why. And I'll try not to spoil it. I think first of all, and a lot of people have said this, the basic premise of the film is fairly weak, and it has to do with AI. Artificial intelligence is essentially the big baddie in this. The film starts with an AI system going rogue on a Russian submarine, and it causes the Russian submarine to fire a missile that inadvertently turns around and then it goes after the submarine and destroys the submarine, because the AI had fooled the Russian crew in the submarine into thinking that there was an enemy submarine in the vicinity. So it launched a couple of rockets, and then since they could not find the missiles, could not find any rockets or submarines in the vicinity, the AI rigged the rockets to turn back and come back and hit the submarine that launched them, and so it was destroyed. So AI is the big baddie, and within the first few minutes of the film, that's the setup. So that is how we're being made to believe that it's a credible threat. But you see, here's the problem. It's faceless. AI is faceless, it's impersonal, and I don't know if the idea is to try to communicate the sentience of this AI program. In other words, to try to show that, it has a mind of its own now, so therefore we can treat it as an actual villain. I feel like if you want to do that, you're gonna have to be very intelligent in how you go about doing it, because there have been films in the past that have used that theme. If you look at the Terminator series, it's about the machines becoming sentient in the future, or in some way, and then wanting to eradicate mankind, right? But the way that it is done is that it focuses on the struggle for survival of the protagonists in the present day, who are being targeted by machines that have been sent back from the future. And so by focusing more on the survival aspects of the people being targeted, which in the early Terminator films would have been, the Sarah Connor character and the John Connor character, the films were compelling and persuasive on that basis alone. And then there was the menacing, menacing manifestation of the machines that came in the way of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator, which made it very compelling, and the T-1000 in the sequel. So it was, yes, machines, but interesting. If you look at The Matrix, kind of similar thing, where, once again, machines become sentient in some way, and then at some point they decide that they needed to go to war with humanity, and then they won the war. And then they started to use the human beings as, I guess, vessels for harvesting electrochemical reactions or whatever. Basically, the electrochemical processes in the brain was its fuel for its batteries or whatever. And so there was that war. But even then, if you watch the film, the AI or machines they're manifested in the form of agents, right? And the reason why we love the Matrix films, particularly the first one, most people don't care for the second or third, and especially the fourth. But the first one was compelling because of Agent Smith. So he was the visual representation of the AI that was the villain. And so that is why we were quite keen to follow the struggle between the machines and the crew, the humanity or whatever was left of it, right? And so in the case of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, we have an AI, but not a very compelling visual and human manifestation to make the threat posed by the AI compelling or real or easy to connect with and engage with. I don't know if you know what I mean. So the computer or the AI would communicate through, electronically, maybe like through some random text, or in one instance, or at least in as far as this film goes, we are shown that the AI has one human collaborator who turns out to be someone who might have a connection with the Ethan Hunt character, might have killed a love interest of his back in a long time ago, which then made him want to join this Mission Impossible force, or IMF, or whatever it is. But then the connection between this human villain, I forget his name, he was that insignificant, plus the AI isn't really made compelling. For example, it is not explained in the film why this human villain has any interest in collaborating with the AI. It's not explained to us why he would want to cooperate with them. It is not explained to us what it is he seeks to gain from working with the AI. And so the whole thing just doesn't connect. So that's the first thing. The concept of the film just didn't stick for me anyway. But again, am I overthinking it? After all, who watches Mission Impossible films for deep intellectual themes, right? So maybe you watch it for the action. Fine, let's go there. I found the action in this film to be gratuitous, unnecessary, overly stretched, and uncompelling. You see, in my opinion, and I would think a lot of people feel this way too, What makes an action scene compelling is how it ties to the narrative of the story. You can have a film, and there have been tons of films. People like to say this about the Transformers films. I mean, the entire Transformer franchise is a combination of visually spectacular sequences of CGI bits of metal clashing on the screen and explosions happening all over the place, right? But then a lot of people feel that they're not really connected to the action because they don't feel like it's of any real consequence. And so you just sort of sit there, and within the first few minutes, you're kind of numb to the whole thing, and you're just waiting for it to end. And it just becomes boring. Now, for Mission Impossible, it used to be the case that the action was very much tied to the plot and the theme. It was never there for the sake of being there. And if you look at the first film, for example, one of the more iconic scenes, action scenes. And in the first one, there weren't that many action scenes. The one where he dangles from the ceiling at the CIA headquarters to retrieve some data. I mean, that was nail-biting. It was compelling. There was a credible reason as to why he had to subject himself to that. And it was handled in such a way, it was built up in such a way and handled in such a way and executed in such a way that just left you breathless. It was an amazing scene. Now, the second Mission Impossible, all right, there was some things with bikes, stunts with bikes, and all that kind of stuff. I think there was also a break-in scene. They had to break into a lab and do something with some viruses. It's considered to not be one of the better entries. Not until Mission Impossible 4 Ghost Protocol did people now start to have a greater appreciation for the action scenes. Of course, Mission Impossible 4 is where Tom Cruise has to climb up the wall or the exterior wall of the Burj Khalifa building, which is the tallest building in the world. And it turns out he was literally dangling by a rope on that building and filming those scenes. And they were scary, they were shocking, and the way that was executed was compelling and tied to a very important element of the story. And consequent editions of Mission Impossible had similarly relevant action scenes. Now, if you look at Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, a lot of the action scenes just seemed unnecessary. The marketing of the film focused so much on the fact that Tom Cruise was flying off a cliff, right? Or riding off a cliff with his motorcycle. And then if you look at the film that came before, his previous mega smash hit, Top Gun Maverick, again, it was all about they're flying real jets, there's no CGI. And so he's been a great champion of realism when it comes to cinema and the use of practical effects, stunt work, and all of this stuff. I feel like it's gotten so much into Tom Cruise's head to the point where the movie becomes more about that than about trying to tell a compelling story. In other words, it becomes more about how hey guys, watch me do this amazing stunt. I'm unbelievable. I'm 60 years old and I can jump off of buildings. Aren't I amazing?
It's just who I am. I have a massive curiosity and a sense of adventure that I just can't, get enough of it.
And so the film is just filled with these action set pieces that previously had some relevance to the story. So yeah, they could be gratuitous and over the top, but still connected very much in the elements of it was well within the narrative of the story being told, and so it remained engaging, and it wasn't handled. It wasn't overstretched to the point where you got bored. It was executed efficiently, and it was very compact, and it was impactful. In the recent Mission Impossible, what do you have? You have the most boring car chase scene you've ever seen. It's a car chase scene that's broken in 3 parts, literally. So there is the scene, I think this is where they initially exit the police station and then they drive off, and then they are intercepted by some enemy faction, all right? Some henchmen. Then they have to disembark from one car, and then they go look for another car. And then they find that other car, and then they drive that around for a little bit, and then they go to some other place, and then they have to get out of that car, and then they come across a small yellow car, which is supposed to be plate for laughs, I guess, irony. I mean, it's this action thriller. So, wow, which sports car is he gonna jump into to dazzle us with? And it turns out to be a small little Fiat vehicle. And so that's supposed to be some sort of a joke, which it really wasn't. And then yet another car chase proceeds. So all told, that sequence could have lasted anywhere from, it felt like 30 minutes, probably closer to 15 or 20. It was just overly long. And what was the point of that car chase scene? It was just to get the lady in question, the thief, to escape first custody and to escape Tom Cruise and to once again sort of disappear into the ether, giving Tom Cruise yet another mission, I guess another search mission to go and try and find her again and retrieve the key. So it felt like it amounted to nothing at the end of the day. And if you were gonna have that car chase scene just for the sake of having it, you'd have trimmed it down and just made it very, nice and short and sweet, not drag it out. This is the longest car chase I've ever seen, and it was truly uneventful. And at the end of the day, he still loses the girl, because the car chase started how he was trying to get the girl, right? So he finds the girl, gets the girl, and then off they go, jumping between 3 different cars over the span of 15 minutes. And at the end of that, what happens? He loses the girl yet again. So it's like that entire scene need not even have happened, and it wouldn't have affected the story going forward. It added nothing to the story. And there were so many action scenes like that. The scene at the airport in Dubai, that one probably came before. The stuff where they were shuffling between people and hiding in different shops and stores to evade capture and detection. Some of that stuff was interesting, and the initial interaction between Tom Cruise and the thief lady was a bit interesting. Okay, and then it gets to this point where first of all, the AI sort of hacks into their communications and then somehow communicates that there is a bomb that is going to blow up the whole airport and several kilometers outside of it. All right, so the tech guy, the Simon Pegg character, the tech guy sort of has to get in there and defuse the bomb or something. And so he enters into, they determine that the bomb is contained in someone's luggage, all right? And so this guy is able to sneak into the luggage handling area at the airport. And then he sneaks in through the door. Okay, I understand the Ving Rhames character, I think, disabled the cameras leading to that door and might have disabled the lock on the door. So he's able to get into the area. And so now we're looking at this room or this space with thousands of bags there being shuffled around on conveyor belts to go in order to be loaded on different aircraft. And this guy is there in this space in a very famous airport. I believe it is the Abu Dhabi airport. And there's no one there. How can there be no attendance in this room, this luggage room, and there is just conveyor belts with thousands, tens of thousands of bags just being loaded onto different planes, and he's not detected by any airport worker? For me, I couldn't suspend my disbelief there. I'm like, no, this is unrealistic. This just seems ridiculous. And then later on, it cuts to the scene where Tom Cruise is, while trying to evade capture by the people chasing him, he finds himself on the roof of the airport, and then he embarks on his trademark Tom Cruise run. He's got to do his Tom Cruise run, just on the top of the airport. And I looked at that shot and I'm like, yeah, it's just there because it looks cool. I don't think it's there because it adds any value to the actual story being told, just because it's cool. And so the film is full of those types of gratuitous shots that add nothing to the story, which already is flimsy to begin with. Let's not forget, it is already flimsy. If the story was at least compelling, you'd be willing to ignore some of this gratuitous action sequences. You'd be like, okay, yeah, it'll end and then we'll get back to the story. But there was no real story to get back to. Oh my gosh, what else did I hate about this film? And I'm sorry if I'm But it just upset me that the film was much more mediocre than I could have ever expected it to be. And then, all right, let's talk about the people have talked about what happens to one of the female characters, which I won't spoil for you. She's been a major character in some of the previous installments, much loved. There is something that happens to this character that a lot of people didn't appreciate. They just thought she was handled not very respectfully, and whatever happened to her, you know what? The film's been out for a month, so let me just spoil it. I don't care. So basically, the woman dies. Ilsa Faust dies. And for what purpose? No real purpose. Tom Cruise is asked by the human agent of the AI. And once again, I forget the name of the Mexican actor that plays the bad guy. But he gives him a choice saying, one of these women has to die. It's up to you to make a choice. So it's going to be Ilsa Faust or the thief lady that he's been driving around in all these useless car chases. And then this is presented to us as a dilemma for Ethan Hunt. But how can that be? He's only met this girl that day, the thief girl, for just that one day. Meanwhile, he's been on all kinds of adventures with Ilsa Faust, spanning the last previous two movies. They have a relationship, and the films have done a good job of teasing the possibility of a romantic spark between those two. So it's an easy choice to make for a character like Ethan Hunt. Of course, Ilsa is the more important person in his life, and so for him to feel like he's in a dilemma because he can't choose between the two characters, it just seemed artificial, forced, and contrived, and just stupid. Let's talk about the riding off the cliff stunt, the much lauded stunt that was basically the subject of much of the promotional material for the film that we were seeing in the months leading up to its release. The one where he is he's shown riding on a motorcycle, and he's racing up a ramp that is situated on a cliff. He rides off the ramp, off the cliff, into nothingness, and then deploys a parachute. And then you see the director and the crew somewhere not too far away observing this. And then when he deploys the parachute, they're all like clapping, like, wow, this is so amazing. Oh my gosh, Tom Cruise, you were nuts, you're crazy. And so that stunt is being sold to us as something that is so amazing. Can you believe that there is an actor who would go to such lengths to entertain you? Oh my gosh, he's the best thing since sliced bread. You have got to see this film. And yet, when the scene finally appears in the film, like you could see it coming a mile away. They manufacture a stupid reason as to why he can't apparently board the train that he's supposed to be on, in which this lady, who's the thief, is supposed to interact with the person going to buy the key. And so Tom Cruise is like, don't worry, I'll find another way. And then he finds a bike somewhere, and then he chases the train. And then at some point, it becomes apparent to you who's watching that, I'm seeing mountains and hills and rivers. I bet this is where they're going to do the jump stunt. And indeed, that's where it happens. He reaches what looks like a dead end, or I guess a point of no return. And so he says, yo, I'm going to go for it. And then so he rides off the cliff, and then deploys his parachute and aims for the train. The scene was so anticlimactic, I gotta tell you. Because first of all, the entire stunt, the whole thing, has been featured in promotional material for this film. If ever you went to YouTube to watch something, the next recommended video would be the Tom Cruise stunt video where he's flying off the cliff. Like, I saw it like 1,000 times, so that by the time it's shown on the big screen, I'm like, all right, I guess let's be done with it then and see what happens next. So it was very anticlimactic. It doesn't last very long on the screen, and for a shot or for a scene or a stunt that they were placing so much emphasis on in the promotion, you would think there would be more to it than what we were shown. And that's what I was expecting. I thought, this guy was going to be flying, free-falling, and he would be doing all kinds of crazy things. Kind of like how remember in Fallout when he did the, what is it called? When you jump off, he jumped off a B-52 or something at a very high altitude. And then there's a name for it. Anyway, so him and Henry Cavill jump off the plane, and there's things happening. I mean, the scene is spectacular. And also, we didn't really see it in the promotional. In the promotional material, we only just saw him jumping off the plane and figured, I wonder what happens next. And then when we actually got to see the scene in the film, we're like, whoa, he really jumped. And then there was thunder, and someone blacked out, and then he had to dive and save the guy, and then it was insane. Except for this one in Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, the entire stunt is there for us to see, and we had already seen it in the promotional video. There was just nothing more added to what we had seen, except maybe one close-up on his face that lasted about 5 seconds. That was it. So that was very anticlimactic. And then the most stupid thing happens. So remember, this lady that has the key is on the train, and she's supposed to interact with the buyer, the person trying to buy it. And it's gotten to the point where things are starting to get messed up, and they're now trying to kill her. And it just so happens that Tom Cruise, who rode off the cliff and deployed his parachute, is first of all trying to land on the train, which is already hard to believe. Landing on a moving train with a parachute is very unfeasible. And so you're supposed to suspend your disbelief on that one point. But not only that, he actually is able to guide the parachute, him and the parachute, to the exact carriage in which this transaction is taking place, in which this woman is now being held up and they're trying to kill her. He pinpoints that exact carriage, and he's able to smash into it at just the moment that they're about to kill her. And then he smashes into it and then sort of knocks the assailant, the guy with the gun, out of the carriage. He crashes into him, and then he crashes the guy out of the carriage. And so Tom Cruise saves the day. I'm looking at that like, wait, what did I just see? Like, that kind of coincidence is what you'd expect in a stupid Fast and Furious type of film. And some people have said that. They call this Mission Impossible the Fast and Furiousification of Mission Impossible, because the action is so dumbed down. There's too much cheeky humor, which isn't even funny. It's goofy, it's silly. And so, gosh. And then the final stunt is where the train gets derailed, and the carriage, because a bridge has been blown up, one of the carriages is now dangling off the edge of the tracks, and then he's in the lower track that is dangling over the bridge, and so he has to find his way up through the now vertical carriage onto the carriage that is above him. And as it is, the carriage he's on is being pulled down by gravity, and so he not only has to climb through the now vertical carriage, but he's got to keep jumping to the next one and the one after, because they're tumbling down, you see, if I recall. Were they all tumbling down, or was it that just one of them? I don't even remember. But anyway, here's the thing. That entire scene is just ripped straight out of Uncharted 2, the video game. A very famous video game, and I consider to be one of the better installments of the franchise, of the Uncharted franchise. Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, I believe it was called. Great scene, and the opening scene is of Nathan finding himself on a derailed train, and he sort of has to climb his way out of it, even when it's sort of in a vertical state. Cut, copy and paste that whole scene. So I'm sitting there watching this. The plot is boring, the themes are boring, poorly executed, the villain is boring. The entire film relies on this gimmick of people pickpocketing the sacred key out of each other's pockets. Oh, guess who has the key? And then off they go. And the other character looks exasperated. Oh, crap. And then that person interacts with someone else. They bump into the other person. And then someone turns to them and say, well, guess who has the key now? Oh. And then like that happened at least 6 times in the film. It's like pickpocketing just requires you to bump into someone and magically the key is teleported into someone else's pocket, or so it seemed. It was just so poorly executed, was overly relied upon, and it just affected the story, I think. Gosh, I did not like this film. I honestly didn't. And then I come out of the theater and I go to the internet, and what am I seeing? Wall to wall praise. The critics love it. The users, the fans that are commenting on some of these sort of forums such as Rotten Tomatoes like it. It wasn't until I went to IMDb where I started to see more realistic comments. The very realistic 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, even 4-star comments where they were acknowledging many of the film's great virtues and rather great qualities, but really lambasting the film for all the ways it was just wrong, or things were done wrong. And then I go to YouTube where I try to check out what my favorite commentators are saying. People like Critical Drinker and people like Geeks and Games and people like there's all these sort of commentators who do film reviews and are typically sensitive to overt wokeness or progressive left-wing ideas that they believe has infested Hollywood and film and popular culture. And politically, I am aligned with that perspective. I too am not a fan of wokeness and race swapping and all this gender swapping and all that kind of crap. I hate it. And so I regularly watch videos from Critical Drinker, Geeks and Games, and who are these guys? Jeremy, The Quartering, and Tim Pool, and all the rest of them. You probably know these guys. And so I'm expecting to hear these guys give a fair and accurate assessment of this film, and even them, they're just gushing with praise. Oh, Tom Cruise has outdone himself. This is the best one yet, the most spectacular film. And I'm there sitting wondering, are these guys drunk? Are they high? I couldn't believe it. I'm just looking at these videos like these guys are... And I just sort of had this sneaky suspicion that perhaps they have fallen victim to a bit of tribalism, because typically they love to praise Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is one of the few actors who rarely appears in films that have very strong political themes. And when I say strong political themes, I don't mean that he does films with no politics. There's one called Lions for Lambs that he did, where he was one of many actors. He wasn't the lead in that film. He played a U.S. senator. He was awesome. And there's a scene in that film in which he gives a speech about the situation in Afghanistan, which ended up being prophetic because it very much mirrored the events we saw unfolding when America pulled out of Afghanistan recently, right? As usual, he was fantastic in that performance, and that film was really great. So, yes, it's a political film, Lions and Lambs, or Lions for Lambs, but it wasn't like preachy and like woke and all that kind of stuff. So Tom Cruise typically doesn't go near that kind of stuff. And so when Top Gun Maverick did crazy numbers, $1.4 billion, Tom Cruise sort of became the hero of the counter woke culture war thing, you could say. So all our favorite YouTube commentators were sort of rallying behind Tom Cruise and for Mission Impossible to be a success. And perhaps they are now too invested in Tom Cruise films being a success that they are blind. They have become blind to any flaws that might appear in any of his films. And God knows, and I'm an atheist, but I'm saying God knows. That's how strongly I feel about this film. God knows just how inept the filmmakers were in this film in telling a compelling narrative of espionage and conspiracies and a global threat that AI poses. And it would be so easy to do a film on AI. AI is the big, what's the word I'm looking for? Boogeyman of 2023, right? ChatGPT, this, that, everyone's freaked out. The actors and screenwriters are now striking, partially because they're worried that AI is going to take all their jobs. Okay, so we're all terrified of AI. There are so many ways in which you can compellingly tell a story in which AI is the central driving theme, and yet this film fails at it completely. The action was overly gratuitous, unnecessary, overly long and stretched and boring. And I should perhaps add, nothing we haven't seen before. There's a train top fight. We saw that in the first Mission Impossible. Then the derailing train. We saw that in what is it? The Uncharted video game. Not only saw it, but we got to play it. so watching it in the form of a film action scene is actually boring by comparison. And then the car chase. A lot of people compared aspects of the car chase to what we saw in the recent John Wick film or any random Fast and Furious film. There's really nothing in this film that stands out as being uniquely special, and I think audiences have become wise to it. Oh, are you going to see the Mission Impossible film? Well, what's it about? Yeah, Tom Cruise and Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg are going to be running around, and Simon Pegg's going to make funny noises and funny faces. Yeah, but I've seen that like 10 times already in the previous films. What's new about this one? I don't know. It just has Tom Cruise flying off a cliff and running. Oh, he runs, does he? You mean like this? How he's always running? The Tom Cruise run? The famous Tom Cruise run? Yeah. Well, you see what I mean? Like, there's nothing about this film that would really pull you into wanting to watch it at all costs. And I think that's why there just wasn't good word of mouth. There just wasn't a buzz. And say what you will about Barbie or Oppenheimer, the films genuinely have a buzz because there's things to talk about, things that are interesting, things that are unique. People questioning the historicity of the events that are depicted in the film of Oppenheimer. Did Oppenheimer really say that? Is that what really happened? What did the film exclude? What did the film embellish? Where did they not tell the whole story? There's those conversations, right? In addition to discussions about the visual spectacle of the film. And then for Barbie, it is, the themes. Men are watching the Barbie movie and feeling like it's pro-male, and women are watching it and feeling like it's pro-female, and everyone in between is watching it like, yeah, it's goofy, it was cute, loved the flamboyance, the hot pink, the musical numbers, the novelty. We all love Barbie. There was something to it, so something you could chew on. But with Mission Impossible 7, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, just nothing. And also it being a part 1, I don't know, do people just think, well, oh gosh, why go see a movie where there won't be a finality? Because we just came away from watching Fast X, which is now going to be divided into 3 installments. So we've seen 1 of 3 installments. So I think people are now wary of the idea of going to watch a film that's just going to be a part 1, because there's going to be no resolution of the main conflict. So it's just stringing together of boring, mundane, meaningless action set pieces. The film just has no rewatch value. And Tom Cruise, I think, and I do love Tom Cruise, and I do love the Mission Impossible franchise, but I do think that Tom Cruise is gonna have to get his head out of his butt. And I hate to sound harsh, but you can't be like, I want to showcase just how amazing I am, and then overindulge in that sentiment to the point where it affects the story. Do the crazy amazing stunts. Show me things you've never seen. Shoot a movie in space, because I hear he's planning to do that, but not at the cost of a good story. Because believe it or not, I'd be happy to watch a film chock full of CGI action scenes if the film is compelling. Spider-Man 2, my all-time favorite action movie. I probably have watched that film 10 times. It's the only film that I find compelling to watch repeatedly without ever growing tired of it. I went to the theater to watch it 4 times, and since then, every other month, I'll put it on at home and watch it. Because it is an interesting film, and almost all of it is CGI. All of the action scenes, CGI. And not even very good CGI, very dated CGI. The Doc Ock and the Spider-Man fights. But man, the film packs so much emotional resonance because the action scenes that are there, even if not animated the best, it just serves a very important purpose, is very much tied to the theme of the movie. And so it just is such a joy to consume. As opposed to Tom Cruise now, it's like, oh, watch me jump off a building. Watch me fly off a cliff. Watch me fly off a plane. Dude, all right, just take a break from stunts. Sit down with the screenwriter once they're done striking. And then come up with a compelling story. And then insert those action set pieces in ways that add value to the story being told. Because right now, we are not seeing that. And that's the main problem. Whew, I've gone on for so long. I'm going to leave it there. And I'd like to know your thoughts about Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Whew, as far as I can see, unless Tom Cruise decides to do something about it, or at least, until he decides to start placing a greater focus on the storytelling aspect, I feel like the next film might flounder also, the Part 2. And wouldn't it be awful if the final installment in the Mission Impossible franchise, because I believe it will be the final one, for that to be a stinker and a flop like this one? That would be unfortunate. And to the Tom Cruise cheerleaders, and I am one, by the way, you are not serving Tom Cruise well by not being honest about the flaws. Because if you overpraise him, he's just going to repeat the mistakes. That's going to cause the next film to flop even harder.